just got started with this. So finally, you'll be glad to hear architecture governance. You can't forget the origin of the word governance. It comes from government. And that's what it's about. And effectively, the Westminster system, at least to me, is the best government model we've come up with yet. And yet, people seem to forget about it when we're talking about governance inside an organisation. And there's a core rule in the Westminster system, and it's the reason why it was developed, is that you've got three separate and independent arms, and they can't be allowed to interfere with each other, or else you run the risk of becoming a dictatorship or the Westminster government system of government and management keeps separate the legislature, the police force, and the court system. Sorry, this was in the new reform. It's a 2010-2007 version, probably 2003. So the legislature. It's amazing how many organizations go into, say, you've got architecture governance, say, yeah, we've got a governance board. And so what are the set of rules or legislation that you're governing against? No, we haven't got any. Well, what are you stuck standing in court with no law? What's the point? Right? So the first thing is the legislature establishes all of the rules, principles, building codes, whatever you like. That is what's amazing. Okay? They are the legislature. They set down all these rules. The police force is the solution architects. By following the CDP, as they're going through here, they get the principles that are input to them here. It is their responsibility to ensure that their solutions adhere to those principles. That way we devolve it out to the solution architects. You don't have this massive inspection force that's required. You know, that is going in and reviewing the whole thing. It's a huge part of their KRAs and their KPIs. Now, at Adelaide Bank, for example, that's one of the things they determine the bonus of the solution architects getting at Adelaide Bank now at the end of the year. How many of your solutions breach any architecture principles? One of the things, always their number one key points that you get in the solution architects. Yes?
Suggesting that we're more like politicians than judges, policemen, or lawyers.
Good.
Are we more like politicians than policemen, judges, or lawyers?
Well, enterprise architects.
Yeah.
I hope not. I see what you're getting at with the fact that the legislature, maybe that's a dangerous analogy I should avoid. In the current environment, they're with the polys. Oh, bloody hell. There you go. Yes. However, I guess the core difference between us and the polys is that we actually do talk to the solution architects, the courts, before we set the law. Now we sit down and consult with them for other places. And by the way, there are processes to reject the law, bypass the law, and gain exemptions in the architecture process. So it's not a complete perfect analogy. So the courts, for example, make rulings, and this is the missing piece. So this piece is going to go back to that. So the courts eventually are the ones that make rulings on whether something does or does not breach a principle. And most importantly, whether an exemption is allowed or not. Okay? Right? To a certain extent, the courts have a little bit of latitude in the Westminster system to make rulings saying it's okay, you broke the law, but we get away with it because it makes sense in this case. But not the amount that we would actually give the courts in this sense. So we've got, for example, principles around channel independence is a good example, where you must keep separated the user interface logic in a technical engineering sense from the back end. And that's usually got an outcome of that, the capacity to be able to deliver new business products to new channels as new channels come online. And we had an example in Adelaide Bank where there was a particular product that came forward, and the solution architect said, I can deliver this thing much, much quicker if I don't have to adhere to that principle. Now, because we tied it back to the business outcome here that says from Adelaide Bank, we'll be able to, I don't know if this one should be involved in this one, but it's not there. There was an outcome that essentially said that we will be able to bring on new channels as they become available without requiring us to change the core functionality of our systems, for which you drive the architectural principle of channel independence to support that business outcome. Now, when we got down to this architectural governance board down here, where the solution architect put forward an exemption saying, I don't want to do channel independence. First of all, the business person, the project manager, was actually armed with the real information. He didn't understand what channel independence was anyway. But because he could actually go to the business outcomes and say, are you okay if you don't get these? He could go down and say, actually in this case I can. I don't really care about this product. He'd say, quick product, we're going to be killing in 6 months, and I'm going to shut the product down. That was the plan. So that was quite a legitimate case where you would want to give them the exemption. There's no reason to spend the extra money developing in that if the product has an extremely short lifespan. And it was only get out there, hit the killing, and get out. So there are legitimate reasons why you might want to do it. Final point I make here is incredible how often you see people go into organizations and say, we've got one architecture governance board, we've got one board. Okay, but you want the business people involved. I guarantee you combine those two concepts and what we separate business architecture board and technology architecture board, and your business people will stop turning on. The first time they had to listen through an argument of architects sitting here talking about the relative merits of SOAP over HTTP versus SOAP over NQ series, and I sat through there. They'll never come again. So keep those two concepts separate. All right, you must. If you want to genuinely have one group that monitors and enforces or grants exceptions to your business principles, and one that keeps your technology principles. Okay, so that kind of towed issues, and this is the last slide. I apologize, I think I'm 5 minutes over. We started 5 minutes late, so maybe there are the two predominant TA frameworks out there. However, and at last, I know John probably knows the accurate statistics now, but the last time I looked, it was a few months ago, only 30 or 40% of organizations actually have any function at all. I'll growth opportunity there. It's rising rapidly, particularly over the last year or two. I've started to see an exponential growth. EA is really, Gartner would back that up in hype cycle and all those type of things. So it's our personal experience. I've never seen EA as demanded as it has been for the last 18 months or so. Hooray! It's for us. Interesting. Those that do have an enterprise architecture function roll their own. Last look, it was 25% SAC and 15% TOGAF, but I think they're starting to turn around now. There's a reason for that in my view. Few problems I have with both SAC and TOGAF. They don't resonate with this at all. At all. You put SAC and TOGAF from the business person, the CEO, and executive, first reaction is that's an IT thing I don't get. Don't want to understand. It's a very poor starting point for a discipline that, in our view, is about aligning business and IT. Again, this is going to sound like a sales pitch, but the enterprise architecture framework that we put up, I've always inwardly had a completely different reaction than yourself to the business. Oh, business intent, business design, people design, technology design. But to align those, what we do it strategically, we do it conceptually, we do it logically. My wife understands the difference. I don't mean that in a sarcastic sense, but probably when I came with this 10 years ago, it's the first time my wife finally understood what I did for a living. It really is actually intuitively understandable even by people outside the industry. And that is hugely different.
Yes, about the Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework.
The which one?
The FEAF.
Yep. FEAF has its origins in ZACNA. It's just a particular industry twist on it. Again, I find it doesn't resonate with business people. I have no direct experience trying to take FEAF in front of it. I know, for example, at the tax office, where they attempted to adopt that, when they took a variant of it, I forgot what they were using tax administration is right now, to Michael Carmody, the commissioner, did that, don't care. Again, Michael Carmody can instantly understand that framework.
And Scott Bernard, TAQ?
I'd never heard, only first time I ever heard of that actually was when I was talking to Alan at St. Paul. I know that's one of the ones, so I'll have to pass on that. My knowledge is as close to zero as you can get. Apart from having an odd name, still not understand what it means. Given it has such a starting because of tragedy, I guess I better start reading about it and see what it is. Hopefully it doesn't have these problems. I couldn't possibly comment. As a consequence, but the other problems have is the tendency to lead to enterprise, the ivory tower enterprise architectures. They really lend themselves to people going off and just blindly saying, this is what we've got to do, and let's follow it, we try to do beating our word. And most importantly, in my experience, enterprise architectures and solution architectures don't understand. And that, again, a very bad point to be from an enterprise architecture perspective, given that they're your core consumer in many ways. Governance is problematic in my view. But here's a couple of the biggest issues, I guess. There's been an exponential, I don't think I'll tell you something you don't know here, an exponential growth in complexity in IT since ZACNA and TOGAF, ZACNA was the early 90s, and TOGAF were developed. The IT industry looks nothing like it did. I mean, I kind of look back discipline to those days when it was just building mainframe applications and it was nice and easy, and you just deployed it under one box. You didn't have to worry about all these protocols and everything else in 2000 different things. Much more powerful now, by the way, and it's more fun in some ways. but life was easier. Certainly a lot stressful and less stressful in those days. Sorry? But here's the big problem. They lack a clear distinction between EA and SDA and solution architecture. Okay? And that often results in EA attempts to boil the ocean. Essentially do what I would refer to as solution architecture for the whole organization. They start by saying, okay, we've got to start mapping out all the organization's processes, and we've got to start doing everything in BPMN, and then we're going to start doing UML modeling for everything in the organization. Well, you're gone for about a decade if you want to try and do that in any organization of any consequence. And by the time you finish, it's going to drop like things. You have a bridge. You never got your differentiation between what's enterprise architecture and solution architecture. And enterprise architecture should never be playing with BPMN, UML, and all those things. It is not the composable tool for enterprise architecture. A debate back and forth, I personally quite like in solution architecture. We can have a debate whether it's a relevant merit in there, but not in enterprise.
So what tooling are you using then to help follow those linkages? Because they're just on bits of paper, they're very easy to miss and...
Sparks.
Yep.
As a tool, big fan.
Yep, well, that's just your melt essentially anyway.
Yeah, but what you do in Sparks is, because they've got stereotypes, we provide stereotypes over the top, so that you get the links between, for example, stakeholder requests, strategic level flow on to stakeholder requests down in the conceptual.
Yeah, it's just your melt.
Yeah, but no, I think you're thinking that we would try to model. So that business capability model, for example, which is done in Sparks, okay, there's no UML in that. Okay, and then every service, for example, every UML service is tied back to the capability element.
But in TOGAF, you don't normally get the solutions architects involved until the event go all the way down to the opportunity solution.
Exactly.
Should you get involved earlier, that's what you're saying.
Oh, but you should get them involved from the point of view of getting them to understand and getting involved, is my view.
Yeah.
I just know that I was in TOGAF, they don't typically get involved and really follow their process until the end. Now, again, I'm not sure I haven't seen the latest role to process that mapping inside TOGAF and what roles I think should be involved in steps.
I think TOGAF might be interested in all of it.
I'll take your word for it, I don't know. I guess I'll have a look at it. But the other problem I have, particularly with Zachman, it's less of an issue in TOGAF, is that there's nowhere near enough granularity into design. So if you look at Zachman, for example, it's just got application infrastructure inside technology. Ain't good enough. You see we've got 10 layers, Again, that was fine when it was developed, when you was running on the mainframe. You only needed application and infrastructure. And now you've got to have comms, you've got to have security, you've got to have a whole raft of other architectures before you can build a solution. So that's the other major problem I have, which is don't break down the granularity of it. So, putting it all together, enterprise architecture play here, solution architecture is here, solution engineering is here for completeness. This is architecture governance, and I guess our view is a critical success factor is always use the same framework. You can do it in other ways, but then you've got to deal with mappings between them all, and people have to understand the other disciplines. It is a much more natural approach if they're all using exactly the same framework.